Hey everybody, this is Mosco. Welcome to my most favorite topic in the whole world, and it's why I believe Magic Johnson is the greatest basketball player of all time. The GOAT. And no, not Michael Jordan. The popular consensus seems to be that it's Michael Jordan. I'm going to show you, hopefully open your eyes to a more accurate way of looking at things, as opposed to follow what the marketing criteria and what the legend, the myth, that kind of thing, that are basically being spewed out there by pundits, by so-called expert, by people who are basically, their opinion is not any greater or lower than mine, and yours for that matter. But so I'm hoping to promote here at least independent thinking and to take things in perspective and to understand what qualifies truly as a GOAT. So for me, it's very simple. For anybody who knows me, I'm a very simple, logical person, and I have what I'd like to call a GOAT credentials list. So basically there's three major categories along with a few subpoints. And the first major category is dominance and winning. And the three subpoints is essentially, to be the best, you have to defeat the best. Obviously, if you defeat nobody, you can, it doesn't matter if you're 11-0, it doesn't mean shit to me. Now, the second point is, you have to be your entire career on top. And I'm not talking about leading the league in every statistical category. That would be nice. When that person comes along, that person will be the GOAT. But so far, no, I don't think anybody has replaced who I believe is a GOAT, and that's Magic Johnson. Now, you have to. What I mean by career on top is essentially this: if you do ABC, do it at the same level all throughout. Because most players, there usually is a curve. You come in at a certain level, you go up, you peak, and then you go down to the sewers, essentially, below your rookie stats kind of thing, because, you know, father time kills us all. So everything degrades, everything limps, everything sags down. Yeah, so that's what I mean career on top. You go in there, you have a very healthy career in which you are essentially stable, and in terms of production, and you retire. So my third sub point would be an immediate impact on the game. Now, I'm not talking or just an impact on the game. I'm not, and that includes your team, that includes the league, not just yourself, not just your own personal stats and increasing your own personal production. If you are the greatest player in the world, the greatest all-time player in the NBA, and you represent that league, you have to have an impact. Okay, you can't just go there, just stuff all this stats, and then say you're the best when you're gone, nobody misses you. I'm not saying that's Michael Jordan necessarily, but I'm saying that that's a generic view. Now, the second major point is the greatest decade, because George Mikan, Bill Russell, you know, all these players were fantastic in their era. They don't translate cross decades or cross generational kind of thing, whatever the expression that you want to put in here. It's so because the talent pool was not as big. So obviously, if you dominate the best decade, you are the front runner of being the GOAT. You know, at least in the conversation. And I'm going to compare the 80s versus the 90s, and certain aspects even versus today. And obviously the third major category is the stats. And I'm going to show you, because this category, I was basically it's basically important for those who study the game by reading a book or by reading numbers. You read the numbers and it doesn't tell you the story. There's a certain thing called intangibles. And for the record, if you come at me with advanced stats like analytics, like fucking plus minus rating, or like or you can go fuck yourself right now, okay? I have no interest in hearing any of that ridiculous bullshit, okay? Because if you give somebody a pep talk, that doesn't appear on the stat sheet. So by giving somebody a pep talk, all of a sudden he goes and scores 10, 12 points, that doesn't, you don't get any credit for that, right, on the stat sheet. But you had an impact on that. So those kind of advanced analytic, you can suck my dick, basically. That's not happening. Okay, I don't want to hear any of that stuff. Now, I'm going to compare Magic versus Michael, obviously. Magic versus Jordan. I'm going to show you the stats, the pros, the cons, basically how you can interpret the number in a different way, basically. Not just taken for face value. I'm going to compare Magic versus LeBron, even if you since he's in a conversation, since people believe he might be the second greatest player. That's at least what you hear on all the pundit shows. Well, as far as I'm concerned, crazy. LeBron is not even top 5. And I'm going to compare Magic versus Magic, because Magic Johnson could have had a different career path had he chosen. Not different career path, different style of play. And maybe that different style of play could have put him more in a conversation than he is. When people say Magic Johnson is the greatest point guard of all time, it kind of comes sometimes in a tone that says, oh, he's the skinniest kid in fat camp. When in fact, he's the greatest player, greatest winner of all time. Alright, so the first sub-point of dominance and winning is to be the best, you have to defeat the best. And essentially, that is encapsulated in one word, rivalries. Okay? You have to defeat a tough opponent. There's no shame in losing in a final if it's for a tough opponent. That's what a rivalry is. Okay? You have to defeat the best because the best can defeat you as well. Okay? Now, Magic Johnson had that throughout his entire career. Starting off with the 76ers, who were always a final contender and a championship contender, but could never win. The Magic Johnson, before I get into the details of the final, just so you know, Magic started with winning since he was breastfeeding. Okay, he won state, he won high school, he won college, and he won an NBA championship. All those 3 things in 4 years. I don't know a single other person who's done that. Okay, right there, you're talking about winning, dominance, and winning. He barely got into the NBA in his rookie year and already cemented that he qualifies for that domain. Okay? I don't know anybody else who's done that. If you know anybody else, put it in the comments. Teach me, because maybe I don't know everything, but what I know well. So, back to that rivalry. As I said, Magic Johnson had the rivalries throughout his career, and the first one was the 76ers, which he beat on a head-to-head matchup 2-1. In 1980, as a rookie, he gave the greatest performance, arguably the greatest performance ever in a final. Now, for people, as I said, my age, you guys know this. For the young ones who believe that the league started with Kobe and LeBron, show me where Kobe and LeBron did anything even close to this. Now, in Game 5, Abdul-Jabbar got hurt. He rolled his ankle on a basket in second or third quarter. He came back and finished the game, but they were basically out. He was basically out. The Lakers were winning the series 3-2. Nobody believed that they would roll back because Abdul-Jabbar was their main guy. Now, when the main guy is out, and the only person that tells you, "Don't worry, I'll get you home," is a 20-year-old rookie who weighs as much as basically a bag full of wet socks, you go, hey, yeah, whatever. Skinny little 20-year-old kid took his Kareem Abdul-Jabbar seat on the plane and said, "Have no fear, 32 is here," and took jump ball. Now, you have a league of veterans, okay? When you look at the lineup, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's out, he's been in the league forever. At that point, I think he was, when did he come to the league? In 69, something like that? 1970, maybe? He was out. You had Jamal Wilkes, who joined the Lakers in 77, I believe. You had Norm Nixon. You had all these players that are veterans, essentially. And the 20-year-old little pissant said he took jump ball. He's 6'9", he takes jump ball, he dominates left and right, and yes, everybody knows he's 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists. Now, yes, he got those, but the most fantastic part about this is that he had one of the most efficient games that I can ever remember in a final game, especially a clinching game. In that game, I have the stat sheet right here actually, he made 14 out of 23 shots. He made 14 free throws. All of them. It was 14 for 14. And he was 14 out of 23, that's 61% from the field. Okay? On top of that, 7 assists, 3 steals, and a block. That is one legendary performance by a rookie. Now, most people will say, oh, yeah, he won the MVP because he had that great game. No, he was the second best offensive weapon in terms of points, and he was one of the better rebounders in that series behind Abdul-Jabbar. So obviously with Abdul-Jabbar being out and the number 2 having this gigantic, massive game, of course he would win Finals MVP. He won the Finals MVP for this series, not for that clinching game. That clinching game definitely put him over the top, but he had a solid series. Now, 20-year-old rookie, without their captain, I'm sorry, that takes balls, okay? It hasn't been done until then, and it hasn't been done since. This is the only performance and the only player that will ever win Finals MVP as a rookie. It's just not happening again. There's a better chance that Will Chamberlain's 100 points a game will be broken before a rookie wins Finals MVP. This is one of the most impressive feats that has ever been in the NBA and will ever be. Now, and in 1982, he's done the same thing with Abdul-Jabbar. He got the Finals MVP as well, basically passing and making plays and scoring and just toying with them, basically. It was a tough series, don't get me wrong. It was still, each one of the series, they won 42. So he won 6 games. It was not the simple one, considering the lineup that the 76ers had. Dr. J, Mo Cheeks, Daryl Dawkins, Bobby Jones, Caldwell Jones. You had, I don't remember who else, but those enough. Those are, that's one of the toughest lineups that there was at the time. And so that team, because 1983 when the Sixers won, that was actually very interesting for me, because everybody's talking about super teams, but in 1983 that was the first super team I can recall. They brought in Moses Malone, one of the greatest all-time rebounders. They had to bring him in, and one of the more dominant players. They brought him in from Houston to Philadelphia. Moses Malone lost to Larry Bird in 1981, essentially on his own. So from Houston, he came to Philadelphia with Dr. J, with Daryl Dawkins, with Mo Cheeks, with everybody, and they became the first super team, and they defeated the Lakers. So that's what it took for them to defeat the Lakers. You had to create a super team to overcome the 1980-1982 Lakers. That's the only way you could defeat Magic. Well, at the time, in 1983, was what, 23? 24? It's ridiculous. Now, then came the Celtics rivalry. The Celtics rivalry, Magic also won head-to-head 2-1. What is more important about the Celtics rivalry and the fact that we still talk about it today is 2 things, or 3 things. First of all, the Lakers have never defeated the Celtics. The vast majority, if not all of Bill Russell's rings, came at the expense of the Lakers. Jerry West Lakers. They lost every time they met. Jerry West, I think, is 1-9 in finals. Cause look, he's been 10 times in the finals. He won once, and that's not against the Celtics. That was against the New York Knicks in 1972. How impressive is that? That the Lakers could not defeat the Celtics at that time. So Magic Johnson was fighting essentially the curse of the leprechaun. That's what it was called. It's they never defeated the Celtics, even though it's the greatest rivalry. It was called the most one-sided rivalry. So Magic was fighting that. And the fact that and that series was more important, not just because of that, it was because up until 1984, the finals were tape delayed. So the NBA had reputation problems. They had the reputation for drugs and violence and that sort of thing, like a very selfish basketball, unattractive, unappealing basketball. And along comes the third point, which is the most ever watched NCAA final, the highest rated, I think, still to this day, of Magic Johnson and Michigan State versus Larry Bird and Indiana State. So that NCAA matchup, Bird and Magic joined the league at the same time, and the NBA could not wait for these two to meet in the finals. And in 1984 it happened. So for these three reasons, that head-to-head matchup, that rivalry, that series, especially in 1984, is what saved the NBA. That was, I think, the first broadcast live televised finals, especially at least in a very, very long time. Everybody was coming on board. Everybody was paying attention. Oh shit, Magic. Oh shit, Bird. What's going on? Oh, Black versus White. City Boy versus French Lick Hick from French Lick. Like Glitz and Glamour versus Working Class. Oh no, what the fuck's going to happen? Let's blow it up. So all the television stations, all the newspapers, all the reporters, like analysts, whatever, everybody was in. And that series did not fail. That series went to 7 games. Now, Magic Johnson lost that first one. In 1984, the Boston Celtics won. And everybody dubbed Magic Johnson Tragic Magic, and because he made crucial mistakes, I think, what was it? Games 2, Game 4, and Game 7. And yeah, he took it hard based on documentaries, everything that I saw. He took it hard, he was depressed, but came back to the gym and said, I'm going to get him back. And in 1985, he got him back. Not only got Larry Bird back, he got Lakers another title, and he broke the curse. So, 1985 was the first time that any Laker team defeated the Celtics team in the final. So, nobody else can claim that. Though, like that he was the first. The only other Laker team to defeat the Celtics in the final was Kobe Bryant, when he defeated Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen, and Rondo. And they had like what kind of is called a rivalry, because they met twice. I think they lost the first one, they won the second one. So, yeah. Now, in 1987, obviously, the 1987 Lakers were one of they're considered, I think, the second greatest team in NBA history, based on an old Bleacher Report that I saw. And that team was pretty much unbelievable. And they beat the Celtics in a rubber match. So now, the Showtime Lakers that basically came to be during the Celtics rivalry, that saved the NBA. It was a live broadcast. It opened up sponsors and television deals, and I mean, it would still belong to CBS, all the final broadcast, but the world was interested again in it. It gained a reputation again. It got salvaged, you know. That's why we're still talking about that specific rivalry today. Now, just to summarize that specific one, like I mean, as I said, he beat the Celtics, the Sixers 2-1. He beat the Celtics 2-1. So they met 3 times. Magic Johnson won twice. Another rivalry in favor of Magic. This third rivalry was essentially the Pistons. The Bad Boy Pistons, one of the best and toughest and dirtiest and most frustrating team to watch if you're not from Detroit. They're what I call a talented bunch of bullies. And the Lakers met up with them twice, and it was 1-1. They tied the head-to-head matchup. We couldn't get a rubber match because in 1990, both the Lakers had a meltdown essentially. I mean, like everything changed. That was the time everything changed, and the Pistons were kind of not quite the same afterwards, and they kind of went away. Now, not in 1990, in 1991, because the Pistons did do a back-to-back. Oh, by the way, the Lakers won in 87 and they beat the next year the Pistons in 1988 to be the first team since Bill Russell's Celtics in 1969 to win back-to-back. So essentially, nobody did a back-to-back in almost 20 years. So, another thing that Magic Johnson has done. Not only that, Magic Johnson was the first person to win the Finals MVP 3 times. Which in itself, I mean, like, I'm not going to mention too much awards because, like, Bill Russell could have won it left and right every year. The thing is, that award didn't exist back then. Magic Johnson could have won Defensive Player of the Year at least twice, like, because he led the league in steals, but it didn't exist until afterwards. So, the awards themselves, I'm not going to dive into that too much. I'm going to mention it here and there where it matters to, in terms of accenting certain points, both for Jordan and Johnson. But it's not what I use as a criteria to count, like to who's considered the greatest, which is why I didn't mention it previously in my credentials list. Now, let's see. Now, these are I spoke already for about what, like 15 minutes about Magic Johnson's rivalries. Now, let's see. Michael Jordan's rivalries. Okay, let me tell you exactly what I think of Michael Jordan's rivalries. Michael Jordan defeated fucking nobody. 0 rivalries. Nothing. Fuck all. Okay? He defeated absolutely nobody talented. Nobody that, when you talk about the greatest teams in NBA history, none of them are there. Okay? Let's recap. He defeated Magic Johnson in 91 with a team that was completely different than the Showtime Lakers. Okay? You had Eldon Campbell, Vlade Divac, you had Sam Perkins. You had... The only people that remained from the Showtime Lakers were basically Byron Scott, James Worthy, and that's it, I think. Kurt Rambis was with Phoenix. I think Michael Cooper by 1990 retired. I don't remember who else might have been there. I'm sure there were my 1 or 2 more that I'm forgetting. Now, in 91 when he beat Magic, as I said, the lineup is completely different. Still took Michael Jordan 5 games to win. He didn't sweep them, even though, I mean, he should, considering that that team was so less talented than the Showtime Lakers. It took Scottie Pippen's defense to win. Scottie Pippen had to contain Magic Johnson as much as possible. He couldn't do it on his own. And even if you look at game highlights or whatever of Lakers versus the Bulls in 1990, 1989, whatever, when Pippen was already there, Jordan couldn't contain Magic Johnson. He just couldn't in a specific head-to-head matchup. Now, it would have been nice if we had the Jordan-Magic rivalry, but because of his retirement from HIV, we never got to see that. That's one of the things that the NBA got robbed of. That would have been nice to see. Maybe Jordan would have won the head-to-head matchup, but not a clear sweep. So if Magic Johnson would have gotten just one, he would have had 6 titles. Jordan would have had his 5. I mean, this is hypothetical. It's here or there. It's neither here nor there. But, yeah, it would have been nice to see. Now, why are the rivalries more important? Like, very important. It's important because these are the things that you think about throughout history. Ali Frazier, Ali Foreman, the Rolling Stones versus the Beatles, this USA versus Soviet Union, the Cold War. This is the kind of shit you still learn about today at school. The rivalries matter. Jordan didn't have any. Okay? So in 1991, it defeated Magic. 1992 defeated Clyde Drexler, who's just not an option. He's not a. He won a title with Houston being the second or third option offensively. He could not carry the load as a championship, even though he brought the Blazers to the final twice. Charles Barkley, one of my favorite players, but he was not one of those people that is a quote unquote winner. I mean, he's not one of those people that will lead you to a championship. Unfortunately, would have been nice, but no. Then in 1996, you had Seattle Supersonics, Sean Kemp and Gary Payton. Fuck off. Nobody in their right mind would have ever given him a chance in hell to beat Jordan. And then you had Stockton and Malone with the Utah Jazz that faced him in 97-98. These are people that came into the league in 83, 84, something like that. They've been in the league for a while. And it took them essentially, 15 years to make it to the finals? Like 14 years? There's no way they would. These are not... And they used to have a better team in the 80s. I mean, at that point, they also had, like in the 90s, they had Greg Ostertag. In the 80s, they had Mark Eaton, who was a blocking machine. He's a 3,000 plus career blocker. And if you look at any highlights of his, nothing was basically getting up. He would just block everything. So, Michael Jordan defeated absolutely nobody. And rivalries is what makes your story great. Michael Jordan didn't have that. Magic Johnson's entire career was just rivalries. So in terms of dominance and winning, that first sub-point, I mean, the rivalries go to Magic Johnson. He defeated the best. You look back 20, 30 years, none of the teams that Michael Jordan defeated, including the 91 Laker team, is nowhere near the top 10 or top 20 of the greatest teams of all time. It's just not. It's just not. So, yeah, Michael Jordan loses this specific one. Let's go to the second sub-point, which is about career on top. Now, being your entire career on top does not mean you lead the league in every statistical category. It means that whatever you do, keep it consistent, keep it constant throughout your entire career. If you are here, be like that the entire career. Most players, they start here, they have like a little peak, and then they dive way below their rookie numbers because, as I mentioned before, Father Time kicks all of our asses eventually. Magic Johnson did not have that. Magic Johnson, from a statistical point of view and from a results point of view, was on top his entire career. Magic Johnson had a 12-year career, 13 if you count 1996, which I do, so let's say 13. 13 years. He was in the finals 9 times. He dominated an entire decade. So in that decade, he was in the finals 8 times. With the exception of 1981 and 1986, every year the Lakers were in the final. Now, it was not always presumed that he was going to be in the final, and it was not always assumed that he was going to win, because, as I mentioned earlier, the rivalries were that intense. All of the championships had to be earned, and he did. So, 9 times in 12 years, 8 times in 10 years in the 80s. So out of 9 final appearances, he won 5 against some of the best teams in the history of the league. So no real decline in performance, like in terms of winning, in terms of showing results. Magic always appeared there. Statistically, he didn't really have a decline either. From the rookie year, in which he averaged 18 points per game, 7.7 rebounds a game, and 7.3 assists per game, up until 1991, when he had 19.4 points per game, 12.5 assists per game, and 7 rebounds a game. I mean, those are improvements. Also, the other categories, he was a much better three-point shooter and a jump shot, and had a much better jump shot in the second half of his career than he did early on, which is kind of ironic because he started his career as a shooting guard and later on transitioned as a point guard. His free throws were spectacular. His free throws in his rookie year were basically like LeBron's in his peak, which for Magic Johnson standards were not that great, But at the end of the day, he was almost an 85% free throw shooter career-wise. And he, in 1 year, I think it was 1989 or maybe 90, he led the league in free throw percentage. So those are sub-stats that he improved on. But the main categories, his main production, his main everything, he was always there. The same numbers you knew you're going to go and get, like on an average, from Magic Johnson every year. So the entire career, he was kind of stable. He was stable. That's it. 1996, there's extenuating circumstances. There's those intangibles that people don't get to see unless they really analyze the stat sheets. Magic Johnson would have been year 16. Magic Johnson came off the bench. Magic Johnson played power forward. Magic Johnson had reduced minutes. So, with all those criterias, with all those things taken into consideration, the fact that he averaged 14.6 points per game, 5.7 rebounds per game, and almost 7 assists per game is basically the norm of his stats. He would have had similar numbers in most aspects, like his last full season in 1991. So yeah, it's Magic Johnson didn't really have that statistical decline. Michael Jordan, on the other hand, most rookies start here. He started here. So yeah, he's phenomenal in terms of getting his stats, leading the league in scoring virtually his entire career, with the exception of maybe 4 or 5 seasons in total. Yeah, he led the league in scoring every year. That was pretty much a given. You knew he was going to do that. But in the second three-peat, okay, he averaged about 30 points in 96, then about 28 and something, maybe 29 in 97, 27 points in 98, and then retired. And then when he came back with the Washington Wizards, 22 points, 20 points. So basically, everybody has that curve to go down. Michael Jordan retired, so basically when he instead of having a curve go down, he basically went off a cliff. So he cheated himself, not consciously. It's not a conscious thing, because he went to the reason he went to Washington was a gimmick, but he went. But he had more human numbers. Now, another thing with career on top, if you're the best no matter where you are, or no matter who you play with. It's called being capable of adapting. Michael Jordan could never adapt. Michael Jordan needed Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan needed Scottie Pippen, and a rebounder. Without that, fucking nothing. Magic Johnson got to the finals with 3 different coaches. He won titles with 2 different coaches. He had 3 different starting lineups. And the 1991 Lakers, for example, they were not even Showtime Lakers anymore. So, who are the 3 coaches that Magic got to the finals? Jack McKinney, to which he won a title with in 1980. Pat Riley, obviously. And you had Mike Dunleavy, 1991, sorry. So, he brought them all to the finals. He got titles with 2 of them. The starting lineup during the 76ers rivalry essentially was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilkes and Norm Nixon, and in the rivalry with the Celtics was Kareem, Worthy, and Byron Scott. I think you had AC Green at that point also. And in 1991, or the post back-to-back essentially, Sam Perkins, Divac, and Worthy, and Byron Scott kind of thing. Yeah, not kind of thing, he was. But it was not the Showtime Lakers. So, with any one of them, he brought them to the final. He showed them he had amazing wins and division titles and this and that. Yeah, all that good shit that comes with being one of the greatest players of all time. And in my opinion, the greatest player of all time. I will reiterate that. Now, just a little hypothetical. I'm going to talk 1 minute. Magic Johnson was supposed to be drafted by the Utah Jazz, but because of a trade or whatever, the Celtics got that pick. Now imagine if Magic Johnson played with Karl Malone and Mark Eaton. I mean, John Stockton would not have been drafted, I assume, because you have Magic. Why would you need Stockton as well? If, let's say, it was reversed and John Stockton would have been with the Lakers, you think they would have won all the titles that he did? That he did with the Magic won with the Lakers? Not at all. Magic probably would not have won his rookie year, but with that team, he probably would have had one or two in the 80s as well. So here's a hypothetical for you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, and Magic, or Magic, Mark Eaton, and Karl Malone. What would be that is, for me, a beautiful debate. I mean, you could argue in so many different ways. So yeah, career on top in terms of adaptability, in terms of providing the same stats over and over, and in terms of providing the same results and constantly being in the finals throughout his career. In my opinion, that goes to Magic Johnson. Michael Jordan did not win until the second half of his career, essentially. So my third sub point, it's about immediate impact. Now, there's the team impact and then there's the league impact. Now, Magic Johnson, before his arrival, the Celtics couldn't get out of the second round. There were less games, there were less intensity, I guess, but they couldn't get out of the second round. And that's with having Kareem and Jamal Wilkes on the team. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was traded or signed to the Lakers. I forgot which. Leave the comments below. Let me know because I forgot. In 1975, approximately, Jamal Wilkes came in 77. Better than a second round playoff team, they never were. Never. They were never even a championship contender. They were not considered, like, they haven't made it a finals appearance since 1972 when they beat the Knicks. Was it 72? Yeah, 72. They haven't beat the Knicks. They haven't been to the final in 8 years. And that was a completely different team because that was Will Chamberlain, that was Jerry West, that was Elgin Baylor. A completely different lineup. Abdul-Jabbar came in, couldn't get it done. The one title he had before the Lakers was with the Bucks in 71, and you need to have Oscar Robertson. So, I mean, Abdul-Jabbar now has 6 rings, has 6 MVPs, all that stuff, because of Magic. That is the immediate impact he made to the team. Made the immediate impact in terms of intensity and personality from the first game. Everybody saw that classic clip there. Abdul-Jabbar does a skyhook to beat the Clippers at the buzzer. Magic Johnson jumps, chokes the fuck out of him. That was the intensity. And it didn't really go down. That intensity kept going. He always had that personality that, you know, just made you want to root for him. Now, in terms of the league, it goes without saying, him and Larry Bird saved the NBA. I mentioned before, but tape-delayed finals, reputation for drugs and fighting. Everybody's just a black hole, just ball hogging all over the place, like you get yours, I get mine. That was the mentality. Now he comes in, him and Larry Bird come in, they do those incredible passes, basically fake you out of your shoes and smile in your face. Well, Magic Johnson smiled in your face. Larry Bird just pissed down your throat. I'm not sure the NBA would be what it is now. I think it would probably be lower than hockey if it still existed. The fact that now it's most likely it will overtake the NFL, Magic started that. The term triple-double was coined, it came into our existence because of Magic Johnson, because of his incredible, unbelievable passes that faked the cameraman. You had to come up with the term triple-double. Yes, Oscar Robertson had a triple-double for an entire year, but nobody thought of that term. Oh, you had more than 10 here, more than 10 here, more than 10 here. Congratulations, get a cookie. You know, so that personality, that type of game, that type of mentality, that type of passing with the willingness to pass that both Magic and Bird had, Like, it saved the NBA, introduced the term triple-double, and not only that, the most important thing of all, in my opinion, it made the game fun. Both as a spectator and as a player. Because you knew as a player, you would get the ball. You play with Magic Johnson, you know your points per game average is going to go up at least by 5. You know that. As a spectator, oh shit, what is he going to do next? There's an alley-oop. Oh shit, he passed it there instead of passing there. You try, even if you watch old games, like in retrospect kind of thing, you think, oh, I think he's going to pass it there. Oh shit, he passed it there. And that's a game from 30 years ago. Still has you guessing. Those games are more fun. Did you catch the last two All-Star games? Like, not the one where Curry and LeBron picked the team. The ones before basically was just a dunk contest. Nobody played defense. Nobody tried to do anything. Try to see if they can get to 200 points. I find it funny that those players will do an exhibition of dunks and essentially like a stupid, boring game, but none of those guys would join the dunk contest. I find that extremely funny. So that's the impact that Magic Johnson had. Michael Jordan didn't have any kind of impact like that on the game and on the league. That's not actually entirely fair. Michael Jordan is a phenomenal, world-class athlete when he was playing in the 80s and 90s. I should have said was the great, phenomenal athlete in the 80s and 90s. Nobody can score like him because of his athleticism. The fact that that helped elevate the stature of the league, because it's easier, and I will cover that in the Greatest Decade. It was easier to make Michael Jordan the face of the NBA in the 90s, because all the stuff that the NBA stars won't do today. He did participate in dunk contests. He did lead the league in scoring. He is one of the greatest, if not arguably the greatest in-game dunker. That's another debate. You can, but at least at that time, if not all time. But he wrote the coattails of what Larry Bird and Magic Johnson did. They saved the NBA. They blew it up. Michael Jordan and David Stern, because they came, I think David Stern came in 84 and Michael Jordan 84, 85. They both took it to the next level. But it started with Magic and Bird. But that is kind of like lipstick on a pig kind of thing. It was all marketing. It was all about selling shoes and selling jerseys. Magic and Bird actually saved the NBA from bankruptcy, essentially. So, immediate impact on the game, both on the team. Oh, let me go back to the team. As I said, they weren't winning before. As soon as it got there, until the moment he left, they were championship contenders. From the moment he left, they dropped down to the 5th seed or something, or 6th seed. They were not even in contention. Worthy was there, Byron Scott was there. Nobody gave him a shot in hell. And that is the next season after he left. When Michael Jordan left the Bulls in the first retirement, in 1994, Scottie Pippen was one bad call away from bringing the Bulls back to the finals. Was it the finals or Eastern Conference final? He took them higher up in the playoffs by himself, more than Jordan ever did by himself. And on top of that, he led the league, led the Bulls in every category pretty much. If I remember correctly, he won the All-Star MVP. He accomplished quite a bit when Jordan was not there. He accomplished more in the absence of Jordan than Jordan ever did in the absence of Pippen. So, he's just the one that elevated them over the top. How can you be considered the best player if the first season you go out, the team that you left almost makes the finals again? As I said, I'm a logical person. Explain that to me. Am I saying that Pippen is better than Michael Jordan? Absolutely not. But he did get something accomplished after the first three-peat that Michael Jordan couldn't before or since. Michael needed Pippen. You can say that Magic needed Abdul-Jabbar, that kind of thing, but he also went to the finals when Abdul-Jabbar wasn't there. So you can't really say that. When your main center is Vlade Divac, which I love Vlade Divac, I was following him since EuroLeague. The guy is awesome. But he's not Abdul-Jabbar. Magic Johnson had an impact on the game and on the team, both by being there and not being there. Michael Jordan had an impact on the NBA's marketing, but he had an impact on the team, yes. Later on when he left, not so much. So, Magic wins this specific point for me as well. Put your points, put your arguments, comment everything out. As I said, I will read it. But the first major point of dominance and winning, I'm sorry, it's not even close. You can hold Michael's 6 rings, Michael Jordan's 6 rings, and raise them to the air and say, look, he got 6, Magic got 5. Yeah, but it's like me saying, I won the kindergarten championship league at 32. I'm not saying at 32 now, but I'm just giving a number. It's not exactly the same. So one of them has to have a little bit more merit than the other. If you take LeBron's titles, he has 3 titles so far, but the ones in Miami don't mean shit to me. The ones he earned, and from in my opinion, that kind of saved his legacy, was the one that he won against Golden State in Cleveland. Came back from a 3-1 to defeat the 73 team Golden State Warriors. That for me is a major accomplishment. That is who you defeat. The mountain that you have to conquer. Jordan didn't have that. So for me, Magic's all the way through so far. Let's keep going. Now, the second major point is the greatest decade. As I mentioned before, George Mikan dominated the late 40s and 50s. He got the Minneapolis Lakers, I think, 5 titles. He was a gigantic talent. But nobody's going to say he's the GOAT, because everybody knew that the talent then is not even close to what it is now. The 60s, you had that kind of like the start of bringing in talent. Bill Russell, you had Oscar Robertson, you had Will Chamberlain, you had Bob Cousy, you had Sam Jones, you had countless of fucking players, and it's awesome. But I don't think any of them pretty much will hold the candle until compared to the 80s, 90s, and onwards. That is why I believe Bill Russell is not in the discussion for being the greatest of all time. And people don't consider that. It's kind of maybe an intangible point because I've never heard anybody mentioning it. I'm the only one, whenever I had a debate about who is the GOAT and that kind of thing, that brought that up as a reference. I hear people saying, oh, today's game compared to yesterday's game. Yeah, but I'm comparing consecutive decades. The 80s was the best decade of basketball. And I'm not thinking like 2020 vision, hindsight, that kind of thing. It was the best for the good and for the bad. For the good, because it was fun, it was action-packed, it was quick, you know, you had to earn everything. It was bad because also a lot of fighting, a lot of basically chest pumping. You know, nowadays people just flex muscles. Now people back then threw fists. The last major incident thing I can remember was Malice in the Palace with Ron Artest. Meta World Peace. I'm sorry, don't sue me. But you had. Let me just mention a few iconic ones. Dr. J versus Larry Bird, where they grabbed each other by the throat and he was held back. I think it was Barkley that held him back. I don't remember who. while Dr. J just wailed on Bird. Magic Johnson and Isaiah, it's not like they went fighting like with fists, but when Isaiah drove in their final matchup, Magic Johnson came in and just gave him a gigantic elbow. You had McHale flattening Kurt Rambis when he went into for a layup in the 84 finals, because they said to themselves, okay, no more layup. So he flattened him. If any of these plays, I'm not finished yet, but if any of these plays of what I mentioned would be done today, it's a flagrant 2 and like a 3-game suspension. There, it was just, cut it out, guys. Now, you had Pistons versus everybody. Rick Mahorn took on the entire Bulls team, if I remember correctly. Bill Laimbeer against Bird. Bill Laimbeer against Parrish, like the retaliation that Parrish just fucking wailed on him as if it was a Rocky montage. It was Barkley versus Laimbeer. Like fucking everybody fought there. It was just ridiculous. And these are just a few highlights. If anybody knows any link like that kind of counted the fights of like basketball fights by the decade, even by year, whatever, like write it down, give it to me. I would love to see that, because from what I've observed from the 80s and from the 90s, in the 90s there were a few fights here and there, but at that point David Stern was trying to clean up the league, and there was definitely not as much fighting anymore because the penalties were too harsh for anybody to try and swing anything. Because you had your big men. Shaq came in. You had Charles Oakley. You had Michael Jordan, I think, against Reggie Miller that went one time. You had your fights. So I'm not saying that there were no fights in the 90s, but it was nothing compared to the 80s. So it was rougher and tougher. But also, the 80s were more mentally demanding. Now I'll explain that. To win, talent was not enough. Athleticism was not enough. To make a playoff run, it was not enough just to have a good regular season. Everybody's saying, oh, the second season starts in the finals and that kind of thing, in the playoffs and that kind of in the third season, the finals, whatever have you. But it's not even close to the level that it was then, for especially between Magic and Jordan. Magic Jordan won 5 titles and 8 final appearances in 10 years. Michael Jordan, for the first 3 years of his career, couldn't get out of the first round. Couldn't win. When Magic won in his first year. MVP. And nowadays people are saying, oh, Michael Jordan was a baby. Oh, LeBron was a baby. Kevin Durant was a baby. Fuck your baby. Okay? Don't give me that excuse when you have Magic Johnson and Larry Bird winning in their first and second year respectively. Don't tell me that. If you're good, you're good. I mentioned before that there's been no rookie finals MVP. How about a second year player that won an MVP? I mean, Bird didn't do that either, but at least win the title and lead the team. Because for those of you who don't know, Cedric Maxwell got the finals MVP, not Bird. But Larry Bird was the reason that they got to the final and won a championship. By the way, I know it's not about Larry Bird, but let me just mention something, a side note. In 1979, the Celtics had the second worst record in the NBA. I think 25 or 27 wins. The year Larry Bird got there, they were the best regular season team. They had 61 wins, sorry. So, talk about an impact. So the fact that Cedric Maxwell got the finals MVP doesn't mean shit. It was still Larry Bird's team. Larry Bird led them to the championship. That was the parentheses. That was a by the way kind of thing. Now, people are saying, oh, by the way, just so I can get it straight. Before Scottie Pippen showed up, Michael Jordan's playoff record was 1-9. He lost 3-1 to the Milwaukee Bucks. I think at that point they had Terry Cummings. They had Preacher on the team. On top of Sidney Moncrief, I think, and Marquise Johnson. By the way, Sidney Moncrief, Bob Lanier, and Marquise Johnson, they swept the Celtics in '83. That's how tough it was. But just to stay on point, when Pippen got there in '88, the best they could do was a second round elimination team. Now we know Magic and Bird, they won everything. The Bad Boy Pistons won everything. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that point, even though you had to earn it, because Magic Johnson had to defeat the Dallas Mavericks in 7. As I said before, the Celtics in '83 got swept, and that is a champion already. That's a championship team. Got swept by the Bucks. Michael Jordan couldn't make it out of the second round before Pippen. Yeah, but he didn't have as good a team as Celtics and Lakers, that kind of thing. I'm going to compare him to another player that is not even on the NBA's top 50 players of all time. When the NBA did 50 for 50, he was left off of that list, which is one of the biggest crimes in NBA history, right alongside Isaiah Thomas not being on the original Dream Team. That is Dominic Wilkins and the Atlanta Hawks. Now, let's compare. Like Dominic Wilkins won a scoring title. Him and Jordan had a gigantic rivalry in the dunk contest. Like they are a fair comparison. I think they're in the same division even, not just the same conference. Yeah, they were in the same division. Let's compare. In 1985, Michael Jordan lost to the Bucks 3-1. Because back then it was best out of 5 in the first round, for the young ones who don't remember. In 1985, Wilkins didn't make the playoffs. In 1986, Jordan got swept by the Celtics in the first round. In 1986, Dominic Wilkins lost in the second rounds to the Celtics 4-1. Now, first of all, the fact that he's in the second round already better than Jordan. The fact that he managed to get a game out of the Celtics that exact same year also showed that he got something that Jordan couldn't. It's one game, a game. In 1987, same thing. Jordan got swept by Larry Bird. In 1987, the Hawks, Dominic Wilkins and the Hawks lost in the second round to the Pistons in 5 games. So, better playoff success you could so far. Before Pippen, it's not comparable. Okay, Pippen arrives 87-88, arrives to the 88 playoffs. Okay, what happens to the Bulls? They lost to the Pistons in the second round in 5 games. What did Dominic Wilkins do? He took Larry Bird's Celtics to 7 games. Not only that, they were leading the series 3-2, but Larry Bird, being as great as he was, they took the last 2 games. They just couldn't hold it against the Pistons. So I'm comparing in the 80s, not the 90s, because we know the 90s is Michael Jordan's decade. In the 80s, the time span, Michael Jordan being the face of the NBA, being a regular season MVP, defensive player of the year, all that stuff, versus Dominic Wilkins, who doesn't have a single award past his scoring title, and dunk championships in the 80s, for his career essentially. So this shows me 2 things. First of all, besides the fact that I have to compare Michael Jordan to Dominic Wilkins, who I'm a big fan of. Actually, my number in high school was 21 because 32 was taken actually, so that's why. I'm comparing Michael Jordan to Dominic Wilkins. I'm not comparing to Magic and Bird in terms of the 80s. But Michael Jordan was still winning those scoring titles. In 1988, he had 37.9 or something like 37.7 points per game. So he could score, he could produce. And in 1988, on paper at least, they were the same team. One was not that better than the other. They had the same regular season record in 1988. Bulls won the head-to-head matchup. That's why they were the 3rd seed, and the Hawks were the 4th seed. But in the regular season, a same win-loss record. So this just brings to my point about the mentally more demanding, mentally tougher. And Jordan didn't have that mental toughness. Could score points, could do amazing dunks, could do a highlight reel like nobody's business. But Dominic Wilkins at that point was mentally tougher in the playoffs than Jordan. And his team was not that, those teams were not really night and day difference. Especially in 1988, that had the exact same regular season record. And Bulls won the head-to-head matchup because they were the third seed and Hawks were the fourth. So you can't, like, obviously, and not to mention, actually, by the way, kind of thing, about 5 players that played with Jordan in the 80s, in the 88 team, were in the first three-peat team. With the exclusion of Charles Oakley, who was in New York afterwards. So you can't tell me he didn't really have a team. But that team was just not good enough for the 80s, and they were younger and faster compared to the 90s. What was the major difference? Magic, Bird, and Thomas left. Left. They retired. Now, another major thing, I know I say another major thing a lot, but they're all major things. The concentration of talent in the 80s was much higher than concentration of talent in the 90s. Now, I did like a rough count and that kind of thing, like to find out how many Hall of Famers that came into the 80s played significant amount of years in the 80s. I'm not counting if, let's say, you were drafted in 88 or 89 or whatever. But if you came into the league in 1980 until, let's say, until Pippen, until 1988, that's major contribution. Now, on a rough, and I tried to avoid basically spillover from the 70s, in the 23 teams that played in the 1980s, you had 32 Hall of Famers. 32 Hall of Famers. You look at the Pistons, Dantley, Rodman, Dumars, and their leader, Isaiah Thomas. You have other players that should be in the NBA but weren't, like Mark Aguirre. That should be in the Hall of Fame, sorry, but weren't, like Mark Aguirre. You had Bill Embiid. You had Rick Mahorn. Those are basically role players that are extremely important. The Celtics. Let's see, which Celtics would you take? Okay, doesn't matter, any one of them. Larry Bird, McHale, Parrish, Dennis Johnson, and the reason I was debating, because in 1986 you also had Bill Walton. But Bill Walton was kind of the role player, limited minutes. I won't count him too much because he barely played in the NBA, essentially. You had the Sixers that had Dr. J, Moses Malone. You had, if you're talking rivalry-wise, but afterwards you also had Charles Barkley. You had Mo Cheeks. With the Milwaukee Bucks that eliminated the 83 Celtics, Sidney Moncrief is not in the Hall of Fame, but he should be. Bob Lanier I didn't count because he was more 70s than 80s, but he was still there. Marquise Johnson, not in the Hall of Fame. You had, even Denver had a fucking Hall of Famer. Was it Dan Issel? Every player had Hall of Famers. I just named 4 teams, including the Sixers. That's a combined total of about 13, 14 Hall of Famers. Now, one thing that happened, and I think it started in 88, 89, so that's why I was kind of cutting off at 1988. Expansion started. By 1996, you had 6 teams that joined the NBA. It's the Hornets, the Heat, Magic, Timberwolves, Raptors, Grizzlies. And when I did that count, the same type of count that I've done for the 90s that I've done for the 80s, and I couldn't avoid spillovers because all the stars that dominated the 90s came into the 80s, the vast majority of them at least. You had 24 Hall of Famers on 29 teams. And also the intangible, that kind of thing. You also, in the 90s, you also had Penny Hardaway, that's not in the Hall of Fame, probably not going to be. You had or like Larry Johnson. You had all those type of players that just won't be most likely won't be in a Hall of Fame, whether I agree with or not. But there was just not enough talent compared to the 80s. So Michael Jordan dominated a decade that was more diluted. He dominated a decade that was not as tough and not as demanding mentally. And he needed to have, as I said in the previous topic of dominance and winning, he needed to have his specific core around him. Pippen, Phil Jackson, a rebounder. Obviously, role players, but everybody has role players, so I'm not going to mention like Paxson, B.J. Armstrong. In the 90s, the rebounder was Horace Grant in the first three-peat, and in the second three-peat, it was Rodman. And then the team was even more stacked in the second three-peat with Kukoc, with Kukoc and Rodman joining, which I found funny because I mean there's a lot of bad blood between Jordan's Bulls and the Bad Boy Pistons, and they got Dennis Rodman. I found that funny, but hey, it worked. So in the decades comparison, for those points that I mentioned, and give me your opinion as well, I believe the 80s were the better decade. And it's not like hindsight is 2020 or like what is that the term I'm seeing it through Technicolor. No, it was just better. Just do the research. Just look at the games. Look at the style. Back then, the three-point game didn't matter. In the 90s, it started to matter a little bit more, but not as much as it is today. What happened, the major difference in 90s favor compared to the 80s was that marketing exploded. And it exploded around Michael Jordan, who was the sole face of the NBA. You wanted to market the NBA. Before, if Jordan was involved in marketing the NBA, he was sharing the spotlight. But in the 90s, something amazing happened. The 1992 Dream Team. Finally, David Stern allowed professional athletes like NBA players to join the Olympic Games in Barcelona. Because before that, it was college players, as most people know. And all the legends of the 80s and the dominant player of the 90s, like the best players, joined that team. And it brought the NBA to a whole new world, like marketing explosion, a whole new stratosphere, essentially. And Jordan was the face of that. So that's what started the explosion, and that's what started everything. And obviously Michael Jordan at the front of it all, making commercials and making movies and that kind of thing. Like was it Space Jam, the commercial with Bird that with McDonald's in McDonald's, like over the net, under the car, over the roof, ricochet off my balls, nothing but net. And then the Hanes commercial, obviously Air Jordan that started since with Nike in the 80s, but in the 90s everything exploded. Now, yeah, so that worked in his favor in terms of exposure. That built the legend, that built the myth, and that elevated in combination with the 6 titles and dominating the 90s, his stature as the best player. So that's why most of the Jordan fans that I talk to they're essentially sheep without thinking much about it, looking at paper stats. All right, so stats. What I'm going to do is I'm going to compare Magic and Jordan in the generic overview of the stats, and then I'm going to dissect the stats a little bit more and show you about the offensive contribution of each one, and then I'm going to compare Magic versus Magic essentially, because his game was so versatile that he could have easily chosen a different path, and I'll show you using the stats how it actually was. And also, I'm gonna at one point even compare to LeBron because it's a little bit in the conversation. So I'm gonna throw something in there to show that LeBron is just not ready to be in this conversation of who's the greatest of all time. He's not there. And also to show you that how the game is different from today, and when the game started to evolve into what it is today, in particularly the 3-point shot, how they all match up. Because one of the things I hear about Magic all the time, oh, he had no jump shot, he couldn't shoot, he couldn't this, he couldn't that. Besides the fact that anybody who said that never actually watched the fucking games, I don't care if you're a pundit or if you actually grew up in front of the TV in the 80s, no, Magic Johnson could shoot and score in various different ways that even to this day, I mean, like he had the intelligence to actually learn the hook shot from Abdul-Jabbar, the baby sky hook. That served him well throughout his entire career, even when he came back in '96. And if anybody had any basketball IQ, because I hate the term basketball IQ. Basketball IQ is the stupidest expression in the world. If you are an NBA or a professional player anywhere, basketball intelligence is a must. Okay? So, oh, he has the highest IQ of the game or this. Fuck that. No, it's nothing. If you are a professional, be it in sports or being in the work, in the traditional work, not the athleticism necessarily, you gotta be good at your job, right? You gotta be you can't just be like the cleanup on aisle 3 guy. Okay, if there's an IQ or a certain level of knowledge or intellect or know-how that needs to be done, every player in the NBA has that. And another one that kind of pisses me off, killer instinct. He had that killer instinct. He wouldn't take no for an answer. That's the same shit I keep hearing about Michael Jordan all the time. Everybody had that. What happened to that killer instinct in the 80s? Oh, he was a baby. I don't go through that again. So, basketball IQ? Bullshit. Change basketball IQ for something that makes sense, like court vision. Court vision, not everybody has. Okay? You want to make a play, you want to make something happen, you want to create some movement, you need court vision. The IQ shit, fuck off. I don't want to hear about IQ. Now, let's dive into the stats. I wasted enough time. If we look at the overview stats, okay, the overall high-level stats, Magic Johnson had 19.5 points per game, 7.2 rebounds a game, 11.2 assists per game, which is the NBA all-time leading per game average, 52% from the field, 30 and change from three-point line, and almost 85% from free throw. Career. Impressive. Really, really impressive numbers. Let's look at Michael Jordan. 30.1 points per game. Tied for the best per game average in the history of the league. 6.2 rebounds per game, 5.3 assists per game, almost 50% from the field, almost 33% from three-point line, and 83.5% from free throw, 84% from free throw line. That is spectacular numbers, no doubt there. There's no, otherwise there wouldn't be a good conversation here going on if Michael Jordan didn't have those stats. Now, I go back to what I said before. Michael Jordan is the greatest scorer in the history of the game. Hasn't been anything like him before, nothing like him since. Kobe is not the same. Doesn't matter how much they're similar in style or whatever. Not the same. Okay? If let's say, but if you're the greatest player of all time, you gotta have the best offensive contribution. Now, if let's say we compare Magic and Jordan's stats like in more detail, I mean the steals, Michael Jordan leads, but not by much. Like the blocks here and there, all those are kind of minor from a statistical point of view, from a paper stat point of view. Now, basically, what I'm doing is catering to the paper stats, people who just read numbers and don't know anything behind their meaning. But obviously, there's a slight advantage to Magic in free throw, but they shoot so much, it's really not that big of a difference. That's a wash. 30.3% from 3 points versus 33% from 3 points. I'll explain that a little bit more, that stat is a little bit misleading. It's a little bit misleading because both of them didn't really average that many 3-point shots in their career. The 3-point game was not a priority for them. It was starting to come through, but it was not their game. Okay? Now, assists, obviously, it's Magic. Rebounds, obviously, it's Magic. Points, obviously, Michael Jordan. There's no comparison. But offensive contribution-wise, Magic contributed more to the offense than Michael Jordan. And the only two stats that really show that, definitively show that, is points and assists. So, if let's say we take Michael Jordan's points totals and assist total, like an assist is worth 2 points minimum, right? You make a pass to somebody, he shoots, he scores, minimum 2 points. Could be 3, could be 4 if you're lucky to get a 3 plus 1. You know, so let's keep it at 2. So we take the points total plus the assist times 2 divided by the number of games they played. That's how we know how much offense they contributed per game for the career. Now, let's start with Michael Jordan. 32,292 career points. Fucking awesome. Plus 5,633 career assists, which we do times 2, that's 11,266. Now, we take the assists, we take the points, add them up, and divide by the number of games he played, which is 1,072. He contributed to the offense 40.6 points per game for his entire career, which is awesome. I mean, Eastern Conference is a little bit lower scoring, I think. He carried quite a huge offensive load in terms of contributing. Now let's look at Magic. 17,707 career points plus 10,141 career assists. Multiply that by 2 and divide by the number, add them all together, divide by the number of games he played, which is 906. He has an offensive contribution of 41.93. Let's round it off to 42. So, Magic Johnson is averaging almost about a point and a half, let's say, more per game than Jordan. He contributes to the offense a little bit more. Now, it's not that 1 point something points is a big deal. It's not that much. For me, it could be virtually a tie. The point is that Magic should be in the conversation. The fact that he contributes to the offense a little bit more than Jordan shows that he has a more offensive impact than Michael Jordan. Not by much, but yes, a point in something is a point in something. He's a better rebounder. He has how many career triple doubles? 138. He's a very versatile player. Michael Jordan, if he doesn't score points, he's not going to give you 15 assists. On the other hand, Magic Johnson had quite a few games where he scored 30 and 40 points and whatever. I think his career high in the regular season is like 46. So he can score. And not only that, he scores by driving in, by shooting threes, by free throws, back to the basket, left hook shot, right hook shot, left lap, right handed lap. Very versatile. He is not a one-dimensional type of player. Michael Jordan is also a very versatile scorer, but it's only scoring. Because we know if Magic will get you 12 points a game, he will get you 17, 18 assists. And he will get you the 10, 11 rebounds. 138 career triple-doubles in 906 games? Without doing the math, I mean, I think it's like 1 triple-double every 7 or 8 games. That is something. So, I can't expect that from Michael Jordan. Yes, probably. I think he has a few triple-doubles here and there. 10 in over 1,000 games. Yeah. Not a comparison. Michael Jordan is the greatest scorer. When you say, he was one of the greatest defensive guards, that kind of thing. Hey, in 91, Scottie Pippen took him. What happened with Jordan? Jordan is a guard. Pippen's a forward. Why would a forward guard a point guard? These are some of the intangibles that nobody asks. If Michael Jordan is that great of a defensive player or that great of an overall player, how come Pippen was guarding Magic in the 91 final? Jordan in a regular season, look at games. There's a lot of games that you can see, Lakers versus Bulls, like not even in 91, in 89, 90, and so on, when Jordan came into his own, Magic was just manhandling him. Jordan was scoring like a beast, like it's gorgeous, a fucking Picasso every time he does anything. But Magic had the upper hand the entire time, or most of the times, let's say. It's unfair to say entire time. Now, from a statistical point of view, I just showed you Magic versus Jordan, that offensively, Magic Johnson is a better offensive contributor. Is that the highest offensive contribution of all time? I don't know. It's possible. But let's put it this way. If you don't average 10 career assists a game, you better be close to averaging fucking 30 points a game if you want to contribute that much. It's just, I mean, it's right there. Now, let's do that little comparison with LeBron, because LeBron, as I said in the conversation, for me has no business being in the top. I mean, he's top 5 all time, sure, but he's not in the conversation of being the GOAT. Nobody would ever think he's the GOAT. In my opinion, Larry Bird is still better than him. He's a better option than him. Now, LeBron James, if you look at his career stats, very impressive. 27.1 points per game, 7.3 rebounds per game, 7.1 assists per game, shoots a little over 50% from the field, a little over let's say 34.5% from three pointers, and 74% career free throw shooter. Okay. Now, Magic and Jordan both are better free throw shooters. LeBron just doesn't have the clutch gene. So already, like in the end of the game, nobody can count for shit on LeBron. So you cannot be the GOAT if in the last 2 minutes you're not a factor, or you're a liability even. I'll go that far. Liability. He's a better 3-point shooter than them? Yes. Statistically. The thing is, they barely shoot compared to him. He has, almost 5 attempts per game career, like 4 and something. Michael Jordan and Magic, I don't think they even have 2. It's not their game, as I said. So Magic and LeBron are about the same in rebounding, considering Magic is a point guard and LeBron is a power forward or a small forward. I mean, gotta give extra credit for Magic, but statistically they're about the same. Assists, obviously Magic. Points, obviously LeBron. But LeBron considers himself to not really be a scorer, to be an all-around player. Alright, so let's try and match up the stats between LeBron and Magic. If, let's say, I would reduce Magic's stats and convert them to points, so this way they'll be as similar as possible to compare statistically on paper. You take 11.2 minus 7.1, that's 4.1 assists that Magic generates more per game career than LeBron. And convert that to points, that's 8.2. 8.2 plus 19.5, that Magic's averaging career time all time for his career. You have 27.7 points per game. So 27.7 points per game, 7.2 rebounds a game, 7.1 assists a game. That is all virtually identical to LeBron, but Magic is averaging 0.6 points more per game. And he's about 11% more better at the free throw line than LeBron. So, I mean, just to show you, Magic, and this kind of translates also to Magic Johnson being better offensive contributor than LeBron, because as I said, it's between Michael and Magic. It's not between LeBron. LeBron is not in there. So, this to show you between the top 2 popular conversation between Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Like, now the conversation, as I said, is between them, who's the GOAT. Magic has a better offensive contribution than both of them. Now, I'm going to compare now a little bit Magic versus Magic, because there's sort of two phases to Magic career. I mean, you can divide it up to three, one for each rivalry, but you can also divide it up to two. Pre-Kareem's retirement and post-Kareem's retirement. Or like, no, not even retirement. Let me explain it this way. In 1987, Pat Riley went to Magic Johnson and said, in order for us to win, you have to take a bigger role in scoring. Because until then, Kareem was the primary scoring option, not Magic. So Magic said, okay, is that okay with Kareem? Yes, it is. All right, let's do it. And he basically averaged over 5 more points per game without sacrificing any of his other stats. Nothing. Now, here I have the numbers in front of me. In 1986, Magic Johnson shot the ball 12.8 times. Let's round up to 13 times a game, making almost 7. Shooting 53% from the field, going to the free throw line 6 times and making a little over 5 for 87% from the field. Almost 6 rebounds a game, leading the league in assists with 12.6 and averaging 18.8 points per game. Awesome stats. Anybody who does that today, well, maybe not a shoo-in for MVP, but extremely, extremely favored. Now in 1987, when he had to pick up the slack and score more points, here's what he's done. Instead of shooting the ball almost 13 times a game, he shot the ball 16.5 times a game. Basically, about 3.5 shots more per game. Not a night and day difference, right? He made 8.5 field goals from the game, from the field. Sorry, I'm babbling. He shot the ball 16.5 times. He made 8.5 shots. He shot 52% from the field, only 1 percentage less than the previous season. He went to the line 8 times. Oh, I'm rounding it off. 8 times compared to 6 times the year before. Obviously, when you take more shots, you get more fouled. You go to the free throw line more. Shooting 85%. Basically 85 between 87, 2 percentage points. Nothing. And the more astounding part, in my opinion, is his assists per game went from 12.6 the previous year to 12.2. 0.4 percent drop. Like from 12.6 to 12.2. And he still led the league in assists. So, just by taking 3.5 more shots, he increased his scoring average by 5 points. That's it. A few extra fast breaks, then instead of passing it off, he took it up. A couple extra free throws, a couple extra hook shots. That's it. He became an offensive threat by doing almost nothing. Now, 3.5 shots a game to 16.4 to be exact, it's not much. I mean, let's put in comparison. LeBron James is averaging career field goal attempts of 19.6. LeBron is averaging over 3 field goal attempts more per game than Magic at that for his entire career. Michael Jordan has a career average of 20, or rounded off to 24, 23.9, 24 field goal attempts career. That is 7.5 times more. 7.5 more shots per game. That is ridiculous. Now, if Magic went to those numbers, LeBron's numbers, like instead of attempting increasing by 3.5 shots a game, raise it by another 3 shots a game. You telling me he couldn't average 27, 28 points? And it wouldn't even be a major dip in his stats. Instead of 12.2, probably would have had 11, let's say, based on that trend. So Magic can score. And Magic could have been a scorer and more. And if he would have averaged LeBron-style numbers or in terms of points per game, he would be the GOAT. Nobody would even approach him, contest that, because of the other factors that I mentioned. Now, Hopefully this is enough to show a little bit of a case of how Magic is compared to LeBron and Michael, and how he's a better offensive contributor, and how he could have been a better scorer. But there's also the one thing that I hear all the time: Magic couldn't shoot. Magic couldn't shoot. Three-point line, he couldn't do anything, nothing impressive. No. Now, let's talk about that, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know, the three-point line came into existence when Magic came into the league. Before that, there was no three-point line. Everything was just two. And when it came in, it wasn't really that popular. No, not many attempts. Magic Johnson never averaged, or really, like, if you look at his three-point attempts per game kind of thing, 0.4, 0.5, 0.3, that kind of thing. Nothing. Even in 1987, when he was asked to score more, it went to 0.8 shots per game. Now it's attempting less than a shot a game. That is basically a shot, maybe a shot a game. And he didn't shoot it well in 1987. But 1988 also, like 1987, 1988, didn't shoot it that well. Up to that point, really nothing really that well. But then all of a sudden in 1989, when the expansion teams came in and the new generation of players came, the three-point line became more in style. Okay? So in 1988-89 season, he started shooting a little bit more. So he averaged almost 2.5 shots per game for 31.5%. Respectable. Not great. But in 1990, he averaged 3.5 shots from three-pointers, and he shot 38.5%, which is amazing. Basically, he shoots the ball 3.5 times, makes about 2.5 shots, makes 1.5 shots a game. That is awesome. By today's standards, it's even awesome. Now, and then the following season as well, like in 1990-91, when the year he lost to Michael Jordan in the final, he was averaging 32%. 32%, like from 1988-89 seasons, it's 31.5, 38.5, 32, and in his comeback year, when he was coming off the bench, barely shooting the three, he was averaging less than 2 shots a game. He was shooting it at 38%. And it was a power forward. He could shoot. People who say can't shoot, they're very mistaken, because if somebody doesn't want to shoot, doesn't mean they can't shoot. And he proved it because he had to shoot a little bit more, so he did. And he scored. So when I hear bullshit like when LeVar Ball said that Lonzo Ball is basically Magic with a jump shot, I'm not talking about how Lonzo is playing. That's not the point. The point is, Magic has a jump shot. Or more of a set shot. It wasn't exactly a jump shot in a traditional sense. But he could spot up and he could shoot in people's faces, like an open shot, like yeah, just, if you want, look at the highlights from the 92 All-Star game. You know, it's not that far-fetched. Now, if let's compare the same year, like the year that Magic Johnson averaged 38.5 points from three-point line. Michael Jordan in that year took 3 shots a game. He averaged 3 shots a game, and his average was 37.5. So Magic Johnson had a better three-point shooting average in the same year as Michael Jordan, like who is the greatest scorer in the history of the NBA. Now in 1990, both of them started shooting more from threes, because at that point, until that point, Michael Jordan didn't really shoot a lot either. So both of them started shooting more from more three-pointers, and Magic Johnson had the better average. He shot a little bit more, he made a little bit more. It's not night and day difference, mind you. It's still 38.5 compared to 37.6, 37.5. It's 1 percentage point, not a night and day difference. But Magic could shoot it. Alright, so let's recap. The GOAT credentials list. Okay, remember that one? Dominance and winning. Magic Johnson had all the rivalries. Michael Jordan had no rivalries. Okay? Now, Magic's rivalries were historical. All the teams that he faced are some of the all-time greatest. Michael Jordan, no. None of the teams that he faced are in the top 20 even. The decade. The 80s were better because there was, first of all, it was rougher, it was tougher, and in the good way, and sometimes in the bad way because of all the fights. I don't have to go through that again. The mental toughness that the 80s required basically handicapped Michael Jordan. And I'm going to compare it again. I'm going to mention Dominic Wilkins, who's not in the top 50's greatest players of all time, but his Atlanta Hawks in 1988 on paper were the same as them. Same regular season record and number 4 seed, and the Bulls were number 3 seed. Wilkins took the Celtics to Game 7 in the second round, where Michael Jordan got swept twice. Michael Jordan didn't have that toughness. And by Michael Jordan's own words, if it didn't have to go through the Celtics and the Pistons, he wouldn't have won all these championships that he done in the 90s because he developed that mental toughness that Magic and Bird essentially just walked into the league with. They set the bar high. So the NBA was better in the 80s in terms of talent-wise. As I said, like there's like 32, there's over 30 Hall of Famers per 23 teams. There's under 30 Hall of Famers per 29 team in the 90s. Per 29 teams in the 90s. So it was more concentrated. And as I said, the intangibles, the people who are not in the Hall of Fame but should be. The 80s were much more competitive. So the dominance and winning portion, like all the 3 sub-points go to Magic. The better decade was in the 80s. That was dominated by Magic. The stats themselves, let's recap those. Michael Jordan, great points per game, average. The rest are human. Offensive contribution-wise, Magic Johnson generates more offense than he does by nearly 2 points a game for an entire career. So that reaffirms that he's the greatest scorer, but not the greatest player. LeBron James stats, because the reason I'm throwing LeBron James in conversation is because people are saying, yeah, his game is closer to Magic. He's not, as he himself said, he's not a scorer. He considers himself a multi-dimensional type of player. My wrinkly balls, no way, okay? Because he averages more shots per game than Magic. He averages more threes than 3 attempts per Magic. He is shit in a free throw line. And when I did the translation and the stats and the comparison, Magic Johnson has a better all-around stat sheet than LeBron. The only advantage LeBron has over virtually anybody so far in the history of the league, his longevity. He really takes care of himself. He really is lasting a long time playing high-quality, top-notch basketball. I give him the ultimate credit. He will play a game, a full game, and I'll take him for the full game almost over anybody except the final 2 minutes. Well, I'll take anybody except him. So it can't be the GOAT. Not yet. He's not even top 5. I do believe personally Larry Bird is better than LeBron. One of the things also that I don't remember discussing in the earlier point, in the decades, in the 90s and afterwards, the healthcare of the players was much better. There was no bus ride or air or flying coach or flying like mainstream airlines. There's no private jets and shit like that was back then. You travel like you travel. They play with tennis shoes, like those low tops kind of thing. Nowadays, everybody has a custom like biochemist generating fucking shoes in a factory for them. So, yeah, if the players took better care of themselves, obviously you had some exceptions, some anomalies. Abdul-Jabbar played until he was, 42? But, and now the only player I think that I've seen even approaching that is, Vince Carter? God bless him, the guy is awesome. Sure, Hall of Famer. But LeBron, he didn't have the luxury of I mean, he didn't get injured. The thing is, we don't know what happens if he gets injured. If, let's say, God forbid, next year he rolls his ankle, how will he come back from it? He's 30, he's going to be 37 years old, I believe. Not even, no, he's going to be 35, 36, 37, that age range. Then we'll see how he bounces back. Because every player gets injured. He got extremely lucky and he's working his ass off to make sure he's in shape. So all the credit to him. But he's not top 5. He's top 10, but not top 5. And I'm not saying that because he lost 5 times in the final. I mentioned before, it's not a crime to lose in the final. It's just who you lose to and how you lose. And if you bounce back. Losing in a final can build character. Magic Johnson's an adaptable player. He played with 3 different lineups, 3 different coaches, got them all to the final, and won championship with both. Michael Jordan, you can't say that he's that adaptable. Now, on a side note, an assist is harder to accomplish than a point. Okay? It's harder. Oh, what do? You just pass it there and that's it. Yes, you just pass it there, but the guy has to make the shot. If he doesn't make the shot, it's a waste. All that perfect behind the back, no look, that kind of thing. If the guy doesn't make the shot, it's nothing on a stat sheet. So you're not a master of your own destiny. In a shot, you are. You either make it or you don't. You can take 25 shots a game. And whether you make 0 or you make 20, it's completely up to you. You are in control of that. You take a bad shot, you do a bad decision, it goes out. Sometimes even if you make a good shot and a good decision, it can still roll out. Shit happens. But it's still all on you. Now, there's another dissection why Magic is even greater. Because there is a difference between an assist and making plays. Magic Johnson, like when you think Stockton versus Malone, don't get me wrong, Stockton is a fantastic playmaker. But when you have Stockton Malone, you have the pick and roll that he just gives a bounce pass, and Malone does the rest. You have LeBron or Westbrook, that kind of thing, they're doing passes because they're basically chucking it to the three-point line on the outside. That's a pass. A playmaker is a guy who does the impossible pass, who looks for the alley-oop, who puts the ball in the hands of a player who had no business getting the ball because he was so out of position or so boggled down by tons of players. That's a playmaker. So consider all the assists that Magic had and think about how many actual plays he made. How much he set up other players. So there's points versus assists, which assists are more difficult, and then there's playmaking versus assists, which are more difficult. Oscar Robertson never looked for anybody for necessarily alley-oops, or make that behind the back pass, or make that no look. Westbrook, who also averaged a triple-double for a whole season since Oscar Robertson, he doesn't do that. He prefers to go in and do a monster dunk on his own than and rarely sets somebody else on alley-oops. He passes it and the teammates make a shot. Because the style of game today is more open. You have more space to take a jump shot, so your percentage of making it are better. But the game is still shit compared to before. It's soft. So those are all the reasons why Magic Johnson, in my opinion, is the greatest basketball player of all time. The guy plays 5 positions. In his rookie season, he played 5, in the finals, in Game 6. He took jump ball. He played 5 positions. He started his career as a shooting guard. He transitioned to a point guard. And his last year in 1996, he became a power forward. And he still averaged. He had certain games that he basically got 30 points. And had he not retired, this would have been year 16. Sorry. So, this is my case. I could talk about this for hours on hours without end, and I can debate this thing until the skies fall down. Leave your comments, subscribe, press like, click on like, and tell me what you think. And I'll reply, I'll read everything. I appreciate everything, both the good and bad that most likely is going to come my way. And yeah, until next time.